Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another Christian broadcast of I Didn't Know That. Today's topic fits very well into that title because I honestly believe most people think they know all there is to know about it, but definitely don't. I know that because until this week, I too was one of them. Think back. Do you remember parents saying to their teenagers, "Just because others are doing it doesn't mean you should"? Well, guess what? Now it's the adults who are doing the very same thing that they told their children not to do. And they're doing it, I believe, for two reasons. First, it's so much cheaper. And second, so many are doing it. What then is the it I'm speaking of? The it is cremation. Today, 40% of Americans choose cremation for their loved ones compared to just 3.5% 50 years ago. When asked why, researchers say it is because America is becoming less religious. Isn't that sad? But the Bible predicted that. I want to talk about cremation because I want Christians to handle the body of the deceased the way God would handle it. And I want to counter the words of many pastors and priests who say the Bible nowhere answers the question as to the method of disposal of a body. That isn't true. I want to be very clear with you about this broadcast. It's going to be historical, biblical, and very graphic. While the graphic part may be very difficult for some to hear, I believe far too many people have no idea how cremation is actually done. Perhaps I can whet your appetite a little by sharing a cremation myth with you. People proudly and lovingly purchase containers for the remains of their loved ones. Everyone calls those ashes. I thought that is exactly what they were. I was shocked to learn there are absolutely no ashes at the end of cremation. None. If you listen further, you'll learn all about that and more. Let's first talk about the history of cremation. Scholars believe the practice began during the early Stone Age, about 3000 BC. It then spread across Northern Europe. During the Bronze Age, it moved to the British Isles and into what is now Spain and Portugal. Then the spread continued. From 800 to 600 BC, the Romans and Greeks cremated their dead because they did not believe in an afterlife. But cremation became rare with the early Christians who considered it a pagan practice, and it had completely disappeared in Europe by the 5th century. As you know, cremation has made a comeback. I rarely hear about a burial these days that's not connected to a cremation. My greatest concerns in this surge are how God feels about it, and whether those who are having their loved ones cremated or considering that for themselves are really aware of what takes place during the cremation process. I don't believe any of us should do anything we haven't thoroughly investigated beyond the cost advantage. So, the remainder of this video will be devoted to the cremation procedure. It will, as I said, be graphic, perhaps beyond what some can handle. But I wholeheartedly believe those considering cremation absolutely should know all the facts. Here they are. When you or your loved one dies and cremation has been chosen, the body is sent to a crematory where it is cleaned, dressed, and moved to a combustible container, typically made of wood. It is then placed into the cremation chamber. The temperature in the container is between 1,000 and 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Think about how hot that is. Flame is aimed at the torso. The soft tissues begin to tighten, burn, and vaporize from the heat. The skin becomes waxy, discolors, blisters, and splits. The muscles begin to char, flexing and extending limbs as they tighten. At this point, what is called the pugilistic stance often occurs. The black and charred body will suddenly sit up in a defensive position. Elbows will be flexed, as well as knees, hips, and neck. Fists become clenched. At this point, I'd like you to take a moment and visualize what you just heard. The father or mother you loved for a lifetime suddenly sits up inside a furnace and goes into what looks like a boxing stance, ready to fight anyone around. If you could see this, and you can ask to do just that, might any of you ask yourself, how did I let this happen to someone I've cared so much about? I might wonder if, on some level, that person in that furnace is ready to kill those who did this to them. This pugilistic stance is available for viewing online. It took all I had within me to actually look at it. But I felt I had to do that to give you an honest look at cremation. I was shocked at what I saw. Then, bones of the person are the last to go. They begin to flake and crumble. At the end of the cremation process, two things occurred. First, a magnet is used to remove all excess metal left behind. That metal is then recycled. Next, the bones that did not incinerate. These often include thigh bones, arm bones, hip pieces, skull pieces, are pulverized in a blender-type machine. It is important to note that the cremated remains, which are often still recognizable as human skeletal remains, are swept into a tray. Sometimes there is inevitable residue left behind from other cremated people, mixed into the pulverized part of your loved one. So your container may contain parts of someone other than your loved one. At this point, the pulverized bones go into the container you chose. There are no ashes in that container because no ashes remain. You then pick up a container filled with a bit of just bone dust that remains from a blender machine. The entire cremation process takes about 2 hours. This was an incredible learning experience for me. I honestly believed that inside an urn I've seen at a funeral are the ashes of an entire person. I was shocked to find out I have been wrong all these years. Your loved one is gone, except for pulverized bone. I hope you learned something in this video you never knew before, and I hope you will share it with others. One final reality: the cremation of your loved one releases a considerable amount of carbon dioxide and pollution into our atmosphere. Imagine how many people are cremated every day, spreading this into our world. Thank you for listening to part 1 of my videos on cremation. Next week, I will bring to you from the Bible God's view of your creation choice. I pray you'll join me for that because, as a Christian, what he thinks is the most important since he created that body in the first place. You may hear things next week you've never heard before. In the meantime, leave a comment or suggestion for future videos and have a very, very blessed week as you continue to take your own personal journey through the entire Bible.